through the power of bite-sized visual content. What we're best known for is turning books into 2 years' worth of dynamic social media posts. We provide a done-for-you service that amplifies your impact because you are sought after, sold out, and become the obvious choice in your industry. But today we have an exciting topic to share with you today. And the topic is I'm not sick, I'm psychic. And we're going to be talking about healing the body through an emotional and creative process. Our guest today is Bri Capirsi, and she is a highly intuitive creative from the enchanting forests of Pacific Northwest in the US. Now, her mysterious illness has led her to study Celtic shamanic practices, spiritual theory, mediumship, Western intuitive astrology, and light magic for the last 7 years. With the ability to process energy and integrate aspects of the mind, the body, and the soul experience, Bri has not only healed her own illnesses and insecurities, but it's absolutely sparked a flame in her to assist other highly sensitives to heal through their own experiences also. With an online business practice, she teaches others how they can naturally process and integrate their emotions as part of their daily routine for overall wellness. So can you please help me welcome to the show, Bri?
Hello.
Hi, good morning or good evening to you, and good morning to the rest of the world.
Yes, good morning, Sally.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be able to share with our audience today your journey, because I know when we spoke originally, it's been an incredible journey, and you've got lots of really incredible insights to share with us today. So, can you explain to the audience a little bit of your backstory and this sort of mysterious illness?
Yes. So, starting from about the time I was probably 10, I started noticing that I had these like shakes that would happen whenever I was nervous. And it started out really small. I didn't think that anything was really wrong. Until like about, age 12 to 13 is when I started having symptoms where I would just drop to the floor and just start convulsing, but it wasn't necessarily a seizure. Or like my legs would just lose muscle tone for no reason, and people would have to like push me around in a wheelchair, like at work and stuff. And it would happen like just out in public, like if I was at a funeral, if I was working at the store, if I was like pretty much anywhere in public, like my body would just freak out, and it would take sometimes like multiple hours to get me back to like normal function. So that is the basis of what I dealt with from age like 13 to age 27.
Wow. So with that, I can only imagine other people's experiences of it, because if it's similar to a convulsion, obviously that frightens people because people don't know what to do. Were you able to communicate and sort of not only reassure yourself but reassure others, because you would have not been I'm not going to say used to it, but you'd had experienced it for so long that you were aware of what was going on? Were there things that led up to it? Just curious how that all sort of rolled out.
I know I could sort of identify when I was about to come on. It felt like a weakness in my chest area that I would be like, "Oh, I think it's going to happen." And then, essentially, like, it wasn't like I was, like, completely unaware, like, but because I was so discombobulated with, like, the situation that was happening with my body, I was very much scared of my body, actually. When I think about it, I was scared that it would happen and that I would get the negative attention from other people of like, oh, are you doing this for attention, or like, are you actually sick, or like, and so eventually, or I think it was around age 23 that I made a zine that I just handed to people when it happened, because I'd had so many people call an ambulance for me, and and I'm just like, no, this happens all the time, please don't call an ambulance. So they'd read the book and they'd be like, well, what can I do?
Yeah, yeah. And isn't that, yeah, I didn't even think about the ambulance side of things. Obviously, it's very fearful for you, but for others, it would be fearful as well. And then there would be the automatic go-to, which when people are caring is going for that ambulance. But if it's not I'm going to say, was it not necessary? Was it? But I suppose you had got so used to it, it wasn't necessary for you because you just knew it was a waiting game. Is that right?
Yeah, because it wasn't ever it wasn't ever necessarily, like, so severe that, like, I needed that. It was just, like,
Mm,
my body would just be like, I couldn't do anything. It wasn't like I was having a medical problem, and so, um, yeah, I think, a big part of my autonomy and, like, gaining control over the situation when I was in that emergency state
yeah,
of, like, just dropping to the floor and not having control of my body, it helps to have, that like, that zine to give other people to say, like, "This is okay, this happens, it's not, like, a really intense ordeal, even
yeah,
though it feels like it."
yeah, yeah,
I just, like socially, it was very weird because it's like, "Oh, like, what is happening?" And it's not so bad that you haven't need an ambulance, but it's still this weird freak out thing that's happening. It's
yeah,
yeah, it was very strange to deal with.
yeah,
And it's not like I could give them a diagnosis either.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Because God bless, we all love our labels, don't we?
yes.
It just makes things easy, supposedly. So, from a social perspective, at such a critical age, for sort of going through your late teens into your early 20s, how did you cope with that, and how did those around you cope with that?
Um, well, I think it was very weird. I like, my family was very, concerned for me. That's why they took me to so many doctors to try to figure out what was wrong with my body.
Mm,
At work, people just really responded. A lot of people were very helpful and wanted to help me.
mm,
I think that was like the main response is like, "Oh, how can I help you? I'm scared for you."
mm,
And I guess there was this part of me that always was a little bit shameful that like my body was making other people fearful.
mm,
And so that would happen a lot. But in general, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just like my body initiating fear for other people that was the problem.
yeah, yeah. And did, when you wrote the e-zine, about what it was, which almost became your handout, what inspired that, and what sort of elements did you pop in it to help other people feel comfortable? Because clearly this was a service thing for you. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, I'm a very creative person,
Mm,
and that's, the nature of why I decided a zine would be good because also at that time, I lived with a lot of creative people,
mm.
and they're like, "You know what you could do is you could make a zine, and
Yeah.
then other people would know what to do." And so in the zine, it was basically like, "Okay, if you're not aware that this is happening with me, turn to this page." But or like, I would just say, like, if you aren't aware or if you are aware of like that this happens with me, and then it would give a list of like, don't call the ambulance, like, put me in a room that's with the lights off, turn on calming music,
Mm,
like, I'm still aware, I just might not get back to you right away while I'm like like managing all of this that's happening in my body,
yeah,
and that just that it wasn't a seizure and that I didn't need like immediate medical attention.
yeah,
And then I sort of went into, like, this has in the past, this has helped me, in the past, this hasn't helped me, just so they kinda get an idea
yeah.
of how they could support me in that moment when it does happen.
And that would have been, I can only imagine, having been experiencing that alongside you, but how um, comforting that would have been for somebody in when they're in that panicked fear state for you,
Mhm.
how that would have helped them normalize what was going on so they could actually support you in the best way possible versus.
Exactly, because before that point, it really was just, like, chaos, and Bree's not okay, and it's an emergency situation,
Yeah,
and me like, in a sick state trying to calm everybody down, which is that's should never be the person that has the illness's problem to deal with, but with some people, that's just the reality.
yeah, and that would have minimized the highly stressful state for you, as you've just said, with that side of things. So talk us through, obviously there was was a long period of time, it was unknown. You've sort of sound as though you've instinctively worked out ways to manage it, with having so many great creative people around you with lots of really good ideas. So you've been in an environment which has encouraged you and helped you work out, the best way to manage it. But obviously there was a lot of it. There was a long journey of discovery as to what was really going on specifically for you. So
Mhm.
talk us through some of that.
Yeah, so I think, I grew up with in a Mormon family, and so they were sort of like, well, like we're gonna take you to the doctor, try to figure this out. So I went to neurologists, physical therapists, physicians, all these different doctors to get like different opinions on what was wrong with me.
Mm,
And, I think at first, the doctors, like, they just did a bunch of tests and kind of ruled out everything that they thought it would be.
yeah,
Um, but then it got to the point when I was going to the doctor's offices where they said, like, "We can't find anything medically wrong with you, so it's probably psychological."
yeah,
And I find this more often than not with women, like, the more women that I talk to that have these illnesses that, like, doctors can't put it in a box, like, we're always labeled like, "You must be crazy."
yeah.
Um, I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh, because I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with me," like, and it's yeah, it's so that was I then it was a mental health thing a journey that I was on to see, like, is it because I have anxiety?
Mm,
Is it because I'm depressed? And so, I went through or I met with a bunch of counselors. I went through this life training program that, like, definitely, like, I, like, felt like I was on top of the world, and I was so happy, and even, like, at certain points there, I'm like, "I think I have healed it," but
mm,
like, even at that point, after doing all of this emotional work and living with a lot of, like, very emotionally aware creative people through my 20s,
mm,
um, and it still happened, like, a lot. It happened, like, more often, I would say, like, a few times a week.
oh,
Um,
wow, as much as that. Okay, wow.
so it wasn't and, there were some windows where, like, I would be doing pretty well, and then it'd be, like, every couple months or so, but, like, there were time periods where it was as much as 3 times a week, so, um, yeah, I got to the point where I was like, "Well, this isn't a physical problem, and it's not an emotional problem," and I was working with my naturopath to try to figure out, like, if it was something that was, like, more alternative,
Mm,
and that's when I met a very fascinating person who was an intuitive counselor, who kind of opened my eyes to the journey of how this could be an energetic problem.
mm, mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
it's giving me goosebumps just mentioning that, so there you go. But when
yes.
yeah, where so you've met this person, you've had your eyes open to other and newer possibilities. What was your first what was the first part that became exciting for you that sort of took you down this journey?
Well, I think because I had been so, kind of cynical about my health because I'd been trying to search for an answer for, like, 13 years,
Yeah.
I was when my intuitive counselor brought up, she's like, "It's visual meditation. That's what it is." I'm like, "I don't know about that." But then, like, when I started doing her meditations and then realized that I was having otherworldly experiences and that my sickness was going away,
Mm,
that's when I started to get excited because I had been so skeptical about it, of like, "Well, you can't just tell me that this could be the solution to my problems and that we're just built the same way and that I'm psychic like you.
mm.
I don't that's not gonna be the solution to my problem." And and so then when it was, I was like, "What?"
Yeah, mind blown. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what did that what I suppose what I'm thinking the word tipping point came what up when I've started to ask a question. So when you settled into the knowledge of there was a little bit more to it, and there was you've got the energetic and the psychic aspects there. What happened next? Because I mean, when you've gone from sort of that not negative or that cynical space to the aha moment. So it's that aha moment where something absolutely lands for you and you move
Mhm.
forward. Describe that for us, because a 13-year journey of, not getting really an understanding, and then having this aha moment. Walk us through some of that.
Um, well, I was just so I remember there was a day that I was just sitting there and kind of contemplating, like, even, like, my spiritual journey, because 'cause I've always been a very spiritual person, and even through that life training program that I did, there's a lot of aspects of spirituality that were brought through in that program, and, um it was just this very joyful feeling, this, like, that I'm connected again, like, from
No.
being so disconnected from the universe, like, because of having this problem and feeling disconnected from others because they have to constantly worry about what it's
Mhm.
like, with others, and then to meet this other person who's like, "I understand your experience, I know how to heal this experience because I healed myself," because she
Mm.
was also one of those people that was, like, that was just like me.
Yeah,
And, like, as I started doing what she said, that, like, I felt like my body felt better for the first time in my entire life.
yeah,
It was just this experience, like, I mean, I would say it was, like, one of the best moments of my life because I had been searching so long for it
mm,
and, like, thought that it would never happen. I really thought I was gonna be sick my whole life.
yeah,
Um and had a lot of connections with other people that had illnesses, and I just wasn't expecting there to be an answer for it. And like, for me, it was this answer of energetics, of like, when I started doing my visual meditations, and then I started like hearing people talking to me from the other side,
mm,
and experiencing this sensitivity.
mm.
Like, I can also say it was like also a very overwhelming experience,
Yeah, 'cause it was
as well as very exciting.
yeah. So you touched on a word there around I suppose, the energy and how it works. So what was the most shocking or exciting, depending on which way you want to spin it, realization around this energy for you, and the curiosity that you would have started to have, sort of bubbling up around what was going to happen next with it, how it works.
You mean just like with my psychic experiences that I started having, or?
Just in, I suppose I'm thinking in any more the energy side of things, because there was one thing that you said you suddenly felt connected. And,
Oh, yes.
yeah, when someone's disconnected, or sorry, I shouldn't say when I felt disconnected, I haven't felt energetic. It's almost like the power plug's been unplugged. But when
Mhm.
you feel connected and you find your people and you're connected to yourself and all those sorts of things, it's almost like plugging the power cord into the energy. You've got the vibration, you feel the warmth and all those sorts of things. That's my experience of it. So I'm just curious as to, when you suddenly felt connected, which to me is the energy aspect of it, what was that for you?
Oh, so it was this feeling of feeling alive, for one thing. Like, it was the first time I've ever felt healthy and alive.
Mm,
But it was also, I started having like a lot of profound downloads about the world and how it works.
yeah.
That kind of just opened up my perspective, and I was able to see everything from such a completely different perspective.
Mm,
And so I feel like it was overnight that I went from like being, like, sick and disempowered and, like,
mm,
um, just feeling like the worst possible, like, just stuck, and then when I started experiencing the healing of it all, um, I couldn't stop talking about it. Like, I felt alive, I felt free, I felt like, "Oh my gosh," like, I'm seeing these little patterns in people, like, and I don't know, it all just, like, came together from a larger perspective.
yeah.
Um, and I definitely, I see that when people, like, find what lights them up, like, on, like, inside, and
Mm,
when they connect to their soul,
mm,
because we all do it in very different ways.
mm,
Um that experience does happen where, like, they see everything from a larger perspective.
Mm. Yeah, very much so. And it's interesting to me when you were talking about when it all lands, it sort of it all comes in, so to speak, as you said. All the downloads happen, which is overwhelming, but it sounds as though it actually, and my experience is if it sort of all comes in the right order, that you're able to capture it and choreograph it. It's almost like you've got this big puzzle pieces, all the puzzle pieces all drop into the right spots at the right time for us. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's great. So let's have a talk about now, about the emotions and how the work that you've done for yourself and how you help others, how that I suppose rolls out and how you help them in that manner. Because as you said, everybody's so different. So I imagine it's a bit different for everybody as well, but with some key principles.
Yes. Well, so basically, what I see anyway, I'm only going to talk about what I see is that we have these physical, mental, and emotional or energy bodies.
Mm,
And based on what we experience and kind of the energy that we come into this body with, we have um, certain things we're more drawn to experience than maybe other people.
mm,
And so, um, because with my abilities, I can see like in people's energy centers, like where they kind of carry things and how that relates or how that affects their journey as a human.
yeah.
Um, but really with the emotional aspect, and how I started tapping into that was like these deep emotional release processes
Mm,
that kind of it unravels and untangles those energy centers where we feel the most alive and feel most like us.
mm,
And when we're having those deep release processes, emotionally, or even I see emotional and creative processing as very similar.
mm,
Like you can either like sob for 2 hours in your room, or you can collage or like paint or play music and scream it out. Like,
yeah.
it's just these release processes that kind of move energy through your body
Mm,
in a way where you can access what what really matters to you.
yeah. I'm going to ask you to expand on that a little bit more, and I'm just going to give an example. I went one of my girlfriends does the most amazing yoga retreats, and she got us to do. I'm going to call it she had this incredible music, and it was a dance where we just literally shook for, I think it was 8 or 10 minutes, but we just shook all of our every part of our body, and it was a great experience because it was a room full of women, so we were all being a bit crazy, which we all loved it, and all the rest of it. But that the level of energy that was generated in my own body by just movement, and it was that sort of that shaking movement for a first time a person experiencing that was absolutely incredible and electrifying. So that's sort of what you're talking about. I know it wasn't, I suppose that may have been a release of some form, but that's the sort of thing that you're talking about, is tapping into that level of energy in some form and letting it go. I love the sobbing because many women have done the sobbing in the bedroom, and we've done the screaming in the pillow, and we've gone to the side of a cliff face like I do, where I go hiking and have a big yell, and all those sorts of things. So, talk us through some of the creative elements of that, because here in Australia, there's again another lovely girlfriend that does art therapy in corporate.
Mhm.
So there's lots of different things. So I'd love you to explore the sorts of things that you do, so people know what the possibilities are, and then we could talk a little bit about the work that you do.
Well, so what I find interesting about people, so like you say the word creative,
Mm.
and they just imagine like, well, I'm not an artist, or like,
Yes.
I don't write music, and you're like, there are so many different ways that you can be creative.
Mm,
Like whatever you're creating with your body is moving energy, like that, like
as simple
whether
as that.
it's body movement, whether it's chanting meditation, which I love, it's
Mm,
like you're creating these big sound waves inside your body that's very creative, or like just playing music and singing. I've had a lot of profound downloads just from so I met this intuitive astrologer who was also a sound healer, and she was able to connect the parts that, like, based on what we say in our tones, it aligns with our astrology chart, the tone that we're actually speaking.
Mm,
And that tone can be healing if we're just focusing on that tone, and that's very creative. It's
mm,
so just like when it comes back to frequencies, drumming, I go to a lot of drum circles here,
yeah.
uh, where I'm at, and just like, you know, it's anything that makes you feel like a big release and where you feel free.
Mm,
Um, yeah, mainly a musician. So singing for me is where I feel alive, but everyone has their own unique gifts and talents um, that are sort of looking to be lit up. And so you'll find like a lot of people who enjoy speaking,
mm,
um, like their throat chakra, you can tell just talking to them of like, oh, this is what they're creating with their voice is healing them.
mm,
And so, like, even at times when I feel like what I've experienced with my trauma is too much to give to another person, I'll
mm,
just speak it out on a voice memo because that's very creative. At least it's getting that sound out of my body and where I'm able to express.
mm,
So, just these things like, collage, painting. But what I've also found um, is that in more of the energy realm sort of things like creativity with Celtic shamanism
mm,
and visual meditation, it's almost like what you're creating in another realm in your head and visually is helping you move through energy as well.
yeah.
Um, And that's what feels actually most naturally to me, if I was to be honest, is qigong, and that sort of meditation is what kind of brings me back to myself. And also what I'll say really quickly is that I I feel like also the most profound pieces of information that someone can learn about themselves is right after a big release process. It's
Mm,
like that's the piece that they need to integrate.
yeah.
Whatever. So I always find that as like the most sacred moment is like right after you've released something creatively or physically.
Mm,
Um, the realizations that come in right there are like, that's the juice. Like that's what you need to use to integrate like the next lessons or whatever you're looking to like balance out in your life.
yeah, brilliant. And from that perspective of receiving those gifts and those downloads and that sacred moment, is there a way that you suggest capturing that? I'm asking that because everyone talks about journaling and those sorts of things or recording things. What's a great way to capture those so you can continue I suppose, keep the gift continuing of the learning process?
Yes, well, I mean, I love to write, and voice memos too are my thing. And also conversing with another about it
Mm,
to kind of bounce the idea off of them, because I find that who people surround themselves with
mhm,
are often the people that they're learning the most from, or like, that's the next lesson that's coming in. And
yeah.
I've been able to identify it down to astrology signs and energy bodies where I'm like, "Oh, all these people in my life are Capricorn. I wonder if I have a lot to learn about authority right now." Um,
Yes. Learning the
like
thoughts by the sound of
that
that in
kind
a
of
different way. Yeah, yeah, brilliant. I was just going to ask you too. There was one thing that I'm just quickly reading my notes that I wrote down. Um, we're often, with everything that occurs to us, we're often guided. Um, and in that guiding process, I'm sort of half laughing at myself here. There's lessons that we need to that keep reappearing. You know,
Yes.
like a couple of times I've got, God, not this lesson again. I've already done this lesson, not again. So,
Yes.
so talk us through some of I suppose the way in which the emotional body heals itself through that repetition and through that. And it's not always the same lesson in the same way and at the same stage. It's often the same. It's often a repeating lesson to expand on what has already occurred. So I'd love you to hear your philosophy around that, and I'd love you to share a little bit more about how you actually work with other people if
Mm.
people are going through different things and they're needing a hand with things.
Mhm. Well, that's fascinating you say that because even just this morning, I was, like, like, thinking about the trigger and the expansion, that happens in the emotional body as we so, like, um, when you experience a trauma, it and I say trauma and people get all like, "Ugh," about that word, like, what is trauma?
Yeah,
It's like trauma could be like, your mom forgot to pick you up from school one day. Like, it could be like the smallest thing that, left an impact and that you remember it. Like it's in your energy body because you have a feeling about it.
yeah,
That's what I identify as like impact moments or trauma. Even it doesn't have to be like the worst thing that ever happened to you.
mm,
So
mm,
in these, because there's so many layers,
mm,
and I feel like that's the thing about emotionally unraveling something
mm.
is that you're gonna get a trigger at first, and most people try and suppress that. You're like, "Oh,
Push it
not
down.
feeling that."
Yeah.
But then you start realizing the more that you notice it, you're like, "Oh, okay, that's something I need to work on. That's
Mm,
something I need to work on." Well, what I find fascinating about the energy body is that because there are these pieces of energy that we have in our bodies, we always think before we feel. We're
mm,
like, "What do I think I need to do about this?"
mm,
And it's almost like you have to switch your brain. You
mm,
have to feel it first,
mm,
because the feeling is what's going to send the message of what you need to change in your life.
mm,
And so I always see that of like people get themselves more tangled in an energy problem because they'll think first before they feel, and they make it worse, and then it gets bigger, and so then unraveling it gets bigger,
yeah.
or it becomes a more lengthy process. And so um, I find that we're not just here to be energy beings. We're not just here to be physical beings. We're here to integrate the two,
True.
and mental, like with all three.
Mm,
And so the trigger and the expansion, like if we only lived as a physical being, um, and didn't that's all we did, like there wouldn't be any expansion,
yeah.
like spiritually.
Mm,
And also, if we only lived as a spiritual being, we wouldn't feel very safe, and we'd be like, "What's the point of me even being here on the planet?"
mm,
Um, and so really what I do with my clients is I sort of help them. It's similar to, like, how they talk about, like, the whole child, like, meeting the child where they're at? Well, that's basically what I'm doing with, like, with energy, is, like, meeting them at where they're at, and then, like, kind of helping them unravel those belief systems and those problems in their energy body to see what truly matters to them.
mm,
And I find that it's mainly with people that are, I mainly people that come to me are the ones that have, like, a lot of empathy, a
yeah.
lot of creative, like, gifts, that are being suppressed because of society and, like, the way that we live in this world. And it's, they're the ones that are often sick as well, because they're, like, suppressing,
Mm,
um, this because they're being told to do that to be able to live.
yeah.
That or people with disabilities that are very multidimensional.
Yeah.
And that just, those people operate more in other realms than they do in this realm. And so those are a lot of people who I help to like see like, well, okay, so if you're always in another realm, then we need to integrate some of like you feeling safe physically,
Mm,
um, to help you kind of like tap into those gifts to like present them on earth.
mm,
So it's kind of like a different thing with each person,
yes.
based on where they're at in their energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, with what I'm hearing with that integration process, that's the bit that's the difference. It depends on which bit's integrating, but the importance of it is to have that integration, to have the sensory experience, to have the feeling safe experience, and then having the the thing that lights you up, which is ultimately what we're all wanting as beings, is to have that balance. But it's actually more than just the two-dimensional. It's actually the three-dimensional, as you've just explained it there, which is gorgeous. Do you have anything that you want to share? I know we talked earlier about your coffee shop and the beautiful people that you work there. Is there anything that you want to share through there? Any stories or any examples that you want to share with us that may be relevant to the audience?
Um,
You may not.
I'm trying to think.
On the spot.
Yeah, I'm not good with thinking of things up on the spot. I'm very I drift off. Um,
Well, let me give you
but
some drift. Do you want me to give you some drift words instead?
okay.
Yeah, because I've written down, and I always so I always take notes when I'm doing my interviews, and I always find it really interesting because I see different patterns of what words I capture and how I actually order them. So I've written connection and light up. So connection and light up is the thing, and then empower, express, and then trigger the expansion. So to me, that it sort of is encapsulating everything that you're doing. You're helping people connect, obviously connect in the bit broader sense, but with themselves, to find their true expression of themselves, and that's something that lights them up. And then there's that conversation around triggering versus suppressing, because we're all really good at pushing that stuff down. We're not going to do that, versus triggering that expansion. So I'm laughing at myself through this conversation as well. I have
Yes.
my different experiences as well. So yeah, I'll happily let you share a little bit more there. Obviously, you've got your YouTube channel that you can refer to and things as well. So
Yeah. Well, I think I feel like also what that just made me think of is just like so many of the lovely people I work with at my coffee shop.
mm,
So I work at a coffee shop that employs people with disabilities and empowers them. It's highlights ability over disability, and feels so aligned. And I love everyone there. And
yeah,
I often see when my coworkers are talking to me, they're always like saying sorry or talking about their weakness.
mm,
Um, and like, the weakness is always, like, the most powerful part of you. I
yeah,
think, like, that's the one thing that I wish that everybody, like, could realize is, like, that's the trigger. Like, where you feel the most insecure or where you feel, like, disempowered or that you have a disability, that's often where your greatest strength is, and
mm,
that's where your expansion is, and that's where your gifts are. And so I guess that's one thing I'll say about that.
yeah. I've just tried to capture that our perceived weakness is actually our greatest power of expansion.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that's why we have it. It's like it's sort of our, like it's our hint, it's our clue. It's like so
Yes.
many people, like, wanna run away from the emotion, and then I tell them, like, "Well, that's why you're sad." Like that, or that's why you're disempowered, or that's why you're disconnected from that you feel disconnected or, like, suicidal or not, like, plugged in is because you're running away from the thing that's trying to tell you what you care the most about.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the profound bit. It's the bit that we care about the most that we run away from the emotional side of things. So talk us through. We've got your website going sorry, your YouTube channel going across on the ticker, and you've got a special video that is at the top of the list, so to speak. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes. So, because I've become so passionate about meditation and like what that can do, I have this video that's on my YouTube channel, that kind of goes into the different types of meditation. Because I feel like when somebody says the word meditation, they immediately go to quiet the mind and sit there and like
Yeah.
try to like feel peaceful.
Mm,
But like there are so many more powerful ways to utilize meditation in your life that isn't just you trying to quiet the mind. And so I have that video there to sort of teach others about it and hopefully bring more awareness to sort of the mindful aspect of and how you can use um, visual meditation and chanting meditation and Celtic shamanic meditation and all these very powerful, even like, yeah, Qigong, like slow movement meditation to move energy through your body in a way that can, yeah, help you be healthy.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. And on your website, you've also talked, sorry, as it relates, that was talking about the different meditations for people that are highly sensitive. When somebody's experiencing disconnection and disempowerment, and they have an opportunity to have a conversation with you, what's the first step that somebody in the audience can take with you?
Um, well, I do astrology charts for people. And so I am a powerful believer in astrology, and that taps me into intuitively your energy body and where to, and I always verify with the client of like, is this what you experience? Is this what you experience? Because of someone who's been to so many doctors and so many people that have sort of invalidated my experience, I want to always make sure that what I share and what I see of someone's energy body is something that also resonates with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the intuitive astrology charts is sort of like my map to like get you on the right track of like, oh, if you're a Cancer, then you're very like tapped into emotion and you're very like into nurturing other people and very into their like experience of their life stories.
Mm.
And like I sort of, that's where I kind of like begin the story with the client to like kind of go deeper into the energy body to see like who they are, and then where they might need some work to tap in a little deeper.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because I know we've just had a conversation, and what you've just highlighted there, because I'm Cancerian, is very much where the things is so what that how that landed for me was that makes sense. You sort of start there, you get a reflective understanding of what's going on and why. And that's where that resonance of understanding of self comes from. So you can then dig into the next bits.
Yes, exactly.
And expand into those next bits. Fantastic.
Mhm.
So the best way to contact you, you're across the social media channels as Star Seer Mysteries. Is that correct? That's the tag
Yes,
for across all of them?
correct.
Cool. Excellent. And they can reach out to you through your website. Obviously, they've got great resources on your YouTube channel, and the other social media platforms as well. So is there any closing last words that you want to say? Anything else you want to share before we wind up a great conversation?
Well, I was thinking of this amazing quote so one of my mentors says this all the time, and I love her so dearly. And I just think it fits perfectly with like what I talk about here is like, we're only as sick as our secrets.
Oh,
Um, Stephen Hawking. And I just like the more that you try to hide and suppress and the more trauma you try to bury or whatever you feel ashamed of, like it's making your body sick. And that's what I experienced with me, with all the trauma that I went through and pushed down until the point, that I needed healing. And I was able to unravel all of that, and I am not sick anymore. And so I feel like that just really fits this topic is we're only as sick as our secrets. So
yeah. And that is in itself is the opportunity for connection, empowerment, expression, and expansion. So
yeah.
well done. Thank you very, very much. A great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Truly a gift to the world. And thank you very, very much, Bri, for sharing so much with us. People can reach out to you through all of the social media platforms. Check out the YouTube channels and take the opportunity to connect with Bri. She can certainly help you tap into a new and exciting journey of discovery. So thank you very, very much. Bri, thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. One thing we haven't mentioned, which I just want to make sure that we do, you've got a book coming out as part of a cohort of authors coming out next month called Share Your Brilliance. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep,
Uh-huh.
brilliance. So keep an eye out for that. You'll see that across the social media channels, I'm sure, as well. Again, Bri, thank you very, very much. Audience, please reach out to Bri at any opportunity that you have. And thank you very much for joining us on another episode of Success Secrets Exposed. Thank you again, Bri. Take care.
Thank you, Sally.
See you later, everyone. Take care.